The last video review we published on our site and our channel was Akiba's Trip Undressed and Undead. That was a game that a lot of people hesitated to buy because the combat of stripping people's clothes off looked very lewd in nature. Today we have a new video review for a game that is very much more lewd in nature than Akiba's Trip was. While Akiba's Trip was more interpreted as lewd, with the story explaining exactly why you're doing what you're doing, the new game we're reviewing today is very much lewd in nature because it is very blatant and does not really cover itself up very well. We are, of course, talking about this week's release, Criminal Girls Invite Only. The first thing to note about Criminal Girls is that it was originally a PSP game. This game never left Japan, but the PlayStation Vita version is more of an enhanced port or remake of that game. If you have been watching the other reviews popping up about Criminal Girls this week, you will notice that a lot of reviewers are docking a lot of points because of the fact that this is the most intensely and blatant lewd game on the Vita that has been localized in the West. However, we are trying to show as unbiased of an opinion as possible. As such, here is our video review of Criminal Girls Invite Only. The story of Criminal Girls takes place in hell, where you awaken at the bottom of a tower separated from your body with a guard that shows you a group of young girls that you must lead through the tower. The girls are trapped in hell because they had premature deaths and were tainted with criminal DNA, having died before they were able to commit their crime. Because of this, they are able to go through what's called the Reformation Program. You are to lead them through the 4 trials of hell, to teach them and let them become good citizens and be revived back into the real world. As the game progresses, the story is nothing earth-shattering, but it does focus on the girls rather than you. As you climb up the tower and go through the 4 trials, you will discover more and more about the girls' pasts and see them grow into a team. It's nothing earth-shattering, but it's not a terrible plot either. It's entertaining at the least, but it's not something that you're going to remember for years to come. Despite being interpreted as only a lewd sexual game, Criminal Girls is actually a dungeon crawler RPG. As you progress through the game, you will be crawling through 2D dungeons as you go up the Tower of Hell, as well as fighting enemies to get DP, which is used for buying items as well as using to learn new skills. One thing to note about Criminal Girls is that there is no real base of operations where you always go back to after you complete a dungeon. As soon as you get through the end of the first dungeon, you're already in the second dungeon. The closest thing the game does have to a base of operations is called the Infirmary. As you progress through the dungeons, you will find various little points that are teleports into the Infirmary where you can go and rest, motivate the girls to get new skills, save your game, or buy items in the shop with a DP you have earned. The most useful part of the Infirmary, and one that you will be using the most often, is going to be motivation time, which is used to get new skills. This is also the part of the game that a lot of people criticize the most because it is where the sexual minigame resides. With the point of the game being that these girls are delinquents and don't listen to you at first, you have to motivate them to get them to work for you. In essence, they already know every skill there is to know, but until you motivate them enough to help you, they won't be able to use them. And that is where motivation time comes in. Motivation time, known as punishment time in the Japanese version of the game, is a minigame where you take out temptations off the girls' bodies in order to motivate them to help you. The lewdness of this minigame comes in the fact that in these sequences, the girls are dressed in very cosplay or revealing outfits, and you're using whips, shock sticks, and tickle feathers to motivate them. In essence, and in a very blunt sense, you are basically torturing them enough to make them help you. While these scenes are very revealing and can be interpreted as very erotic, there was some censoring that went through from NIS America to make this game less sexual. First of all, there is a lot of pink fog on the screen. When you get to the most revealing sections of the minigame, you will notice that there is pink fog that stays over the girls' most sensitive parts. While these parts are still clothed partially, they are censored to make sure that you cannot see anything you shouldn't. The other part of the censoring is the fact that the girls used to moan and make noises as you whipped them, tickled them, or shocked them. That has also been removed as part of the censoring to bringing this to the West. Unlike other Vita games that have optional lewd content like Valhalla Knights 3 and Monster Monpiece, the motivation time in Criminal Girls is not optional. The only way you have of learning skills is through motivation time and going through these mini-games, and you need those skills. The more skills you have, the easier bosses get, and without the skills, you will not last 5 minutes against the boss in the game. In simple terms, you have to do the minigame if you want to beat the game. Thankfully, these sequences are very short and you won't be spending even 10% of your entire game time in these games. Each sequence is probably about 10-20 seconds long, so even if you don't like it or find it offensive, you won't have to spend very much time doing it. What you will be using most of your game time for is combat and dungeon crawling. The combat and battle system in Criminal Girls is a little unique because while it is a turn-based game, it offers a few unique things that some RPGs don't have. The unique aspect of the battle system is that there is a random element to it. As you go through each turn, the 4 girls in your party will each give you a command that they wish to do. This is not an optional thing, as you can't access all of the skills at once. You will have to choose one of the commands that the girls give you. If you don't like those commands, you can always just switch out another girl and you'll get a new set of commands until you get something you like. As with other RPGs, you get points and experience points as you win battles. Experience points are used to level up the girls and increase their stats, while the DP points are used for multiple things. The first thing they're used is for the motivation time to learn new skills, but you can also use DP as your currency to buy items in the shop. Another thing of note is that Criminal Girls can be a very difficult RPG to play through. You cannot go through the game and just fight every battle and never stop to grind for DP or experience points and achieve the end. While this can be achieved in some of the earlier trials, you will get to a point where you will need to stop and grind so you can max out all of your skills as well as levels, especially for the final boss fight. When I played through the game, I grinded a lot. Each time I got a new skill set, I'd stop and grind until I maxed out all the skills on my main party, and I still had to stop and grind for at least a couple hours before I could take down the final boss. With all of this in mind, Criminal Girls is a fairly lengthy RPG, making you play the game at least 30 or 40 hours to beat the final boss. After this happens, you can also get more content, like a post-game dungeon as well as 2 extra characters. All in all, it's a pretty lengthy RPG, and if you really get into the system, it's definitely worth the money. The presentation of the game is probably the lowest point we're going to note of in this review. The visual presentation of the game isn't bad, but it isn't great either. When you're going through and crawling through dungeons, you can see a lot of jagged edges on the 2D character models as you go through these dungeons. This is more apparent in 3D games, and it is very rare for you to see jagged edges and incomplete character models on a 2D game. However, when you're in battle, this level of incompleteness is not there. All of the character sprites and animations when you're in the middle of combat look crisp and perfect. It is very strange that it does not look that way when you're just dungeon crawling. The other thing to note of with the presentation is that there is some slowdown during some battle animations in the middle of combat. This doesn't happen very often, and it's only with a couple skills that I used during the game, but it is noticeable for at least a couple seconds. Bringing Criminal Girls invite only over to the West was a very risky move for NIS America. On the downside of the game, the story isn't anything special, the loot content is not optional, the presentation looks incomplete with the jagged edges, and there is some slowdown during some skills. However, past this, there is a decent dungeon crawler RPG for anybody who can get into the genre and wants something new to play. PlayStation Vita Reviews rates Criminal Girls Invite Only a 6 out of 10.